A very good episode of Smackdown this week, but let's talk about the Royal Rumble. It's Royal Rumble season, and no matter how bad WWE may be each year or may not be, right? They have good years, they have bad years, they have good Rumbles, they have absolutely dreadful Rumbles. As an old school fan, I always look forward to the Royal Rumble. I always look forward to Royal Rumble season. I put my hands together and I hope that they don't screw it up. But it is a time of year where people, I think, generally get more excited and start thinking about the possibilities in terms of who's going to win and who's going to go on to WrestleMania and headline and all this different stuff. So I thought what we would do here is, with the Kevin Owens program clearly being extended to the Royal Rumble, let us take a look at the list of potential winners for the Royal Rumble match. You have heard me float Big E's name quite a bit over the last few months. Big E started getting a big push. And it looked like he was going to probably be feuding over the Intercontinental title. And then they kind of got away from it a little bit. And I'm like, all right, well, maybe they're actually thinking bigger with Big E. And I said that I would like to see him. He was my pick to win the men's Royal Rumble match. Someone new who has never won a Rumble before. And it would vault him into a prime position against Roman Reigns at WrestleMania. Well, now with Big E winning the Intercontinental title, that pretty much takes him out of the running for the spot. I think any hope of Big E being the one to win the Royal Rumble is pretty much dead at this point. So I think Big E is off the list. So who else, realistically, could win the Royal Rumble? You look at Sheamus. He is clearly headed for a match with his best friend. I don't know if it's going to happen at WrestleMania. I don't know if it's going to happen at the Royal Rumble. They need somebody for Drew McIntyre at the Royal Rumble. Maybe it's Sheamus at the Rumble and again at WrestleMania. Maybe they do the match. Friendly competition between two friends. Sheamus loses, he snaps. Or Sheamus kind of, cheats to win. And then Drew has to win the belt back from his friend. You could get 2 matches out of it. Sure. I mean, look, they're getting 3 out of Owens and Reigns. So I think it makes it less likely that Sheamus wins the Rumble match. I think there's more of a likelihood of him challenging for the championship at the Rumble, more than there is of him being in the actual Rumble match. And the idea of Sheamus being the one to win the Rumble, I'm not really enamored with that idea. Then we have Keith Lee. A lot of people pulling for Keith Lee to win the Royal Rumble match. It would be cool. Lee had a brief but impressive showing in this year's Rumble match when he went toe-to-toe with Brock Lesnar briefly. And he is in the mix right now. He has been part of this storyline involving Drew and Sheamus on TV. He was in the main event on Monday night. Keith Lee and Drew McIntyre would be 2 baby faces one-on-one for the title. I don't see them doing it. Maybe a triple threat, maybe a 3-way, also involving Sheamus. But for that reason, I don't see a Keith Lee win here as being very likely. Then we have Seth Rollins. Just mentioned that Seth Rollins is on his way back. He's going to be making his big return to SmackDown this week. I expect him, as far as what's he coming back for. Let us hope it's not to continue the Mysterio feud. I think he's going to declare his entry into the Royal Rumble match. And you have to think that to Vince McMahon and WWE, it's got to be appealing for them to want to do a battle of the 2 former Shield members, the 2 remaining Shield members they have on their roster. Especially if Rollins drops the Messiah stuff, which I don't think is going to happen just yet. But if he dropped it and went back to being a babyface, then it would make more sense to program him with Roman Reigns just from a heel-face dynamic. But I think Seth Rollins and Roman Reigns should be kept far apart for at least many, many, many more months. I have no interest in that as a WrestleMania main event. Been there, done that. To me, it hasn't been long enough yet. There's time to do it. Now is not that time. What about Brock Lesnar? Brock Lesnar is not, as far as we know, currently under contract with WWE. In fact, pictures have been surfacing of Brock with this big bushy beard. He's probably living the life right now up in the mountains somewhere, just killing anything that moves. And he probably doesn't even have any interest in going back. He's got all the money he needs. Why would he come back? Why would he come back with no fans? But money talks. And as the ratings continue to plummet, Vince McMahon gets even more desperate. He's trotting out the legends this week. Aside from The Rock, because we know Stone Cold is pretty much retired, there is nobody that Vince can really bring back, a big star, other than Brock Lesnar. And he's done it before. Who's to say he won't do it again? Tis the season. It is WrestleMania season is almost upon us. If ever there was a time that Vince would want to bring back Brock Lesnar, now is that time. Especially with the ratings tanking on Monday nights. They always go back to the big names. That is his MO. So what if Brock Lesnar was a surprise entry in the Royal Rumble? And he won, and then that gives Paul Heyman a man on Smackdown and a man on Raw. Right? He's got his hands in both brands. And we get Lesnar against McIntyre at Raymond James Stadium as it was supposed to happen this year. Could they do it? Oh yeah. Do I want to see it? I don't. Here's something I want to see even less. Bill Goldberg winning the Royal Rumble. Something he's never done before. He's been in the Rumble before, but he's never won the Royal Rumble. I suppose if he was in it, that would count as part of one of his 2 matches he says that he is contracted for each of the next 2 years. So they would only have him left for 1 match after that. I don't know if they want to waste the Bill Goldberg match on the Royal Rumble. But the teases have already begun, with Goldberg openly talking about wanting the match, Georgia versus Georgia Tech, Spear versus Spear, the match that was supposed to happen this year but didn't. It would be a terrible move to have Goldberg win the Royal Rumble and challenge Roman Reigns at WrestleMania. Awful. But think about it like this. If you're Vince McMahon, without any fans in the buildings for the foreseeable future, I'm sure they're going to try to get people in that stadium for WrestleMania. They are not going to do an empty stadium WrestleMania. But they may not get people back in the buildings before then. So I look at Vince McMahon and what he might be thinking. And without any fans in the buildings between now and then, including the Royal Rumble, they wouldn't have to worry about the Boo Birds, would they? If this were any other year, and they were thinking about doing this, and Bill Goldberg showed up in the Rumble, just showing up in the Rumble, let alone winning it, I think the fans would burn that building to the ground. They would hijack the show even worse than they did 5 or 6 years ago. Don't have that problem now, because you got virtual fans. You control the fans, you control the audience reaction. You want Goldberg to come out and get a big pop? He gets a big pop. You want him to get the mother of all ovations when he wins the match? Hey, push a button. It's as simple as that. You don't have to worry about hijacking. You don't have to worry about booing. You don't have to worry about any of that stuff. They could do that and get away with it if they really wanted to. But I think it would be a terrible idea. And I think now that Big E is out of the picture, kind of given up on that, there's only one man who makes sense for the spot as the winner of the Royal Rumble. And they started that story on Friday night. And that man is Daniel Bryan. A man who admits that he is pretty close to being as part-time as you can be. I mean, he's closer to the end of his career than he is the beginning of it. But Daniel Bryan is the only name that makes sense. Bryan became the first man on Friday night to enter the Royal Rumble match. He says it is the only thing he has never done in his career. Of all the cool things he would love to do, he has never won the Royal Rumble. In fact, he said, he was on Talking Smack, he said that he's never even won in 20 plus years in the business. He has never even so much as won a Battle Royal. And so he is making it his goal in the new year to win his very first Royal Rumble. And he turned to Paul Heyman. Paul Heyman has been on the show every week now. Paul Heyman has had some very memorable segments on Talking Smack recently with Big E, with Kevin Owens, and now you can add another one onto the list with Daniel Bryan. And Heyman doesn't even say much, but it's his presence, it's his facial reactions, it's how other people play off of him. It's been great. It's made for some very compelling TV. TV that unfortunately doesn't air on Fox, but it's still been very good. And Daniel Bryan turned to Paul Heyman. He said, "This may be my last chance." He says, "If I win, that means I go on to WrestleMania to meet the Universal Champion, which right now is Roman Reigns. And if that man is Roman Reigns, I'm going to beat Roman Reigns." He says, "And if it's not Roman Reigns, if Roman Reigns is not the Universal Champion of WrestleMania, then at some point when we do meet, I'll beat him anyway." He said, "Not only am I a better fighter than Roman Reigns, he's sure as hell a better wrestler than Roman Reigns." So the seeds have been planted. Now imagine them after this going ahead and having Bill Goldberg, or even Brock Lesnar, win the Royal Rumble. It would be as if they learned absolutely nothing from 5 years ago, 6 years ago, when they first pulled this shit. But my fear is that they feel they may be able to get away with it because, again, there's no fans in the buildings to hijack the show. They're doing themselves no favors by pushing the Bryan narrative on TV again. It feels like deja vu. Here we are again. Bryan going into the Royal Rumble. Unless he's going to win it, it's like these people don't learn. They don't learn from their mistakes. He has to be winning it this time. Why would they put themselves through this again? And tease people and start telling that story only for it not to be him. Now, you could have a situation where Bryan goes all the way to the end of the match and then gets screwed, but somehow ends up working his way into a match with Roman Reigns anyway. Maybe a Raw star wins, and that still keeps the door open for Bryan to challenge Roman Reigns. That could work too. I think at this point, there's no need to be cute. You could just have Bryan win, but sure, you could do that as well. But the point is, Bryan has to be in the mix. This can't just be some kind of red herring and then you kind of swerve everybody and then of all people fucking Goldberg wins the Royal Rumble. You can't be doing that. The story sells itself. There is 5 years of history, going back 5 years, that you can tap into for that match at WrestleMania. So you do Reigns Owens 3 at the Royal Rumble. Daniel Bryan wins and goes on to WrestleMania to challenge Roman Reigns, and it almost doesn't even matter who wins. It doesn't matter if Daniel Bryan wins or not. He may well go to WrestleMania and not win, but that almost is beside the point. It's the story of who goes there and how you get to that point. And the story is right there for them to tell. So then we shift over to the women. We have the Women's Royal Rumble match. Realistically, who are the potential winners? I assume that they are not going to be mixing Raw and SmackDown with NXT this year. This year coming up. So we won't be seeing anyone cashing in on Io Shirai the way that Charlotte did with Rhea Ripley. If we assume that doesn't happen, who are the most likely winners? There's 4 names. There's Charlotte Flair. It looks as if we may be headed to another Charlotte Flair match with Asuka at WrestleMania. Part of that is going to depend on the status of Becky Lynch, and that's another name that I float. Becky Lynch, who just had a baby, and if she wants to come back, and I'm sure Vince McMahon would love to have her back as soon as possible, is it realistic to get her back in the mix by the end of January? I don't know. I don't know what her physical status is at that moment, or how smart that would be, how quickly she could be back in a situation like that. I don't know. But Becky Lynch has absolutely got to be considered on that list of potential Royal Rumble winners as well. Because the Charlotte-Asuka direction, nothing is locked in, I don't think, but it seems that would be the likely direction. Becky is also, though, a member of the Raw roster, and I think part of it may depend on when or if she comes back. And if Becky does come back, she could be the one to come back and challenge Asuka. Or you could do a triple threat. But remember the way that Becky left. Becky made the announcement on Raw that she was pregnant in that very dramatic way. She shared a very emotional moment with Asuka. They were both crying, tears of joy on TV. Asuka, when you pulled down the Money in the Bank, you didn't win a shot at the title, you won the title. And she opened the briefcase and there was the belt. And it was this great moment. And so now we come back to the following year. Asuka is still the champion. Becky, though, is ready to come back and take back what's hers. Take back the title that she never lost. She basically gifted the title to Asuka. That is an obvious story that they could tell. Then you have Bayley. Does Bayley, who was the longest reigning SmackDown Women's Champion, dominated the shows through much of 2020 before losing it to Sasha Banks, and had a lot of memorable moments during the pandemic era of Raw and SmackDown, do you still try to get to the match between Sasha Banks and Bayley, even though you've already done it? You've already done the match. In fact, you did it more than once. Do you then come back around to it again just to give them that WrestleMania match that they've never had? Now, if they wanted to do Sasha and Bayley at WrestleMania, far be it from me to complain. I think they'd go out there and they would absolutely, they would destroy. I think they would have a tremendous match. I don't think they would headline with it. Although if you put them in the main event spot, I think they would deliver. I don't see them doing that, though. I just don't know that you need to do it. And, I hate to say it because that's the direction I was hoping they were going in, but they've already done the match. They already did the match at Hell in a Cell. You did the title change. Sasha won the championship. She's now proven that she can hold on to it longer than a few weeks. You've already told that story. You've already done it. I don't know that you need to just go right back to it again. Which leads me to the fourth choice and the one who I think is going to win and should win the Women's Royal Rumble, and that is Bianca Belair. She has been wrestling Bayley recently. She's lost a few matches, but they've largely kept her strong. Again, I saw her in the ring with all the top names on Friday night, and she didn't look out of place at all. I think if you're looking for a new name, maybe Daniel Bryan on the men's side is not exactly a fresh new name to win the Rumble, even though he's never won it before. He's been around for years. Bianca, though, is a fresh new name. She's very good, and I think you could begin to tell that story of building her to WrestleMania and a match with Sasha Banks. That is the money match. The WrestleMania match, I think, even more than Sasha Bayley. The money match, the match I want to see, is Sasha Banks defending against Bianca Belair. And to do that, I think Bianca Belair should win the Women's Royal Rumble. So these are kind of early predictions, or just kind of an early look at who I think the most realistic options are. As of this moment, we're still in 2020. We're not even in the new year yet. I may change my mind in a few weeks based on the booking on TV. But that's my thoughts on how things are shaping up for the Royal Rumble matches. And feel free to hit me up on Twitter, chime in, let me know what you think. Or if I put this clip up on YouTube, I'm sure there'll be a lot of comments. Do you agree? Do you disagree? Am I missing a name here? Is there a name that isn't so obvious that you think realistically could end up winning the Royal Rumble? Now, months ago, people thought, well, Edge is going to come back. And Edge is going to win the Rumble. But I think they kind of assumed that Randy Orton would be the champion. And he's not. And that's the probable match for WrestleMania. So what sense would it make for Edge to come back and win the Royal Rumble? I don't want to see that. Again, been there, done that. I mean, not to take anything away from Edge and Drew. I'm sure they'd have a very good match. But again, maybe there's a name I'm not thinking of. But that's how I see things shaping up at this point.